For more than a year, the United States and China have been locked in a bitter trade war. Both sides have slapped tariffs on billions of dollars of imports. The dispute started in 2018 when President Donald Trump ordered tariffs to be imposed on Chinese goods. This was in response to a Section 301 investigation by the U.S. Trade Representative. That investigation found that the Chinese regime has been unfairly acquiring U.S. intellectual property. But the real trade war began long before the tariffs. That's because the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has been robbing the United States of technology, jobs, and wealth for years. Now the United States is putting it to a stop. In the 1970s, China's socialist economy was on the verge of collapse, so the regime opened up its doors to the world, allowing the economy to be rescued with foreign investment. Roughly 20 years later, pro-democracy protests arose in Tiananmen Square. After the CCP massacred droves of college students, the international community sanctioned China. Just 1 month later, the United States dispatched a secret delegation to Beijing. President George H.W. Bush had thrown China a lifeline. That lifeline was trade. The United States began importing more and more Chinese goods, but exports did not follow. This was the beginning of the U.S.-China trade deficit. Then, in 2001, the United States normalized trade relations with the regime, paving the way for China to join the World Trade Organization. China ramped up U.S. exports. By the end of 2018, the United States imported over $500 billion of Chinese goods for the year and exported $120 billion, running a trade deficit over $400 billion. That's almost $1.1 billion leaving the United States every day. So, how did this happen? When China joined the WTO, the hope was for the regime to liberalize its economy, which would lead it to become more democratic. Unfortunately, just the opposite happened. China grows its economy through a long list of unfair trade practices. These trade practices are designed to fuel its growth at the expense of its trading partners. Since 2001, China's GDP has grown tenfold. China's economy relies on exporting its manufactured products. It can produce goods cheaply because virtually no environmental or labor regulations exist. On top of this, the state heavily subsidizes its industries. The CCP provides companies with free land, cheap energy, and access to low-interest loans. Then, when the company exports its product to the United States, it gets a subsidy for every item it sends over. The regime also places export restrictions on raw materials, like rare earths, making them more expensive. Foreign manufacturers that depend on those materials pay significantly more than Chinese companies. Then there's the currency manipulation. China undervalues its yuan by 15 to 40%, according to estimates by economists. That means Chinese exporters can sell their products overseas at cheaper prices, undercutting competing exporters. Chinese producers also dump products in the United States at prices so low that American companies can either go out of business or start producing abroad. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, between the years 2000 and 2010, the United States lost nearly 6 million manufacturing jobs. More and more economists have concluded that China is to blame for taking those jobs. For the companies that want to do business in China, they're faced with new challenges. The CCP forces foreign companies to transfer intellectual property, or IP, to local partner companies as a condition of entering the Chinese market. This is called forced technology transfer. The regime's objective is to acquire foreign technology by any means possible to feed its growth. It's part of a strategy described by John C. Demers, the Assistant Attorney General of the National Security Division at the U.S. Department of Justice, as rob, replicate, and replace.
Rob the American company of its intellectual property, replicate that technology, and replace the American company in the Chinese market and one day in the global market.
The regime uses both legal and illegal means to achieve this. The CCP backs Chinese companies investing in and acquiring American companies, including tech startups. This way, cutting-edge technology and IP gets transferred to China. Then there's cyber hacking and economic espionage conducted by actors ranging from Chinese students to state-owned enterprises. According to the Department of Justice, for all economic espionage charges brought by the department since 2012, China is implicated in more than 80% of them. The Commission on the Theft of American Intellectual Property estimated in 2017 that the United States loses up to $600 billion a year to IP theft. And China is the world's top IP infringer, responsible for between 50% and 80% of all IP theft cost. The regime's aggressive plan is sanctioned under an industrial policy known as Made in China 2025. The plan aims to transfer China into a high-tech manufacturing powerhouse by 2025. It targets very specific industries. And there have been plenty of cases of theft. A Silicon Valley cybersecurity firm uncovered one instance of an elaborate hacking operation to steal Western aviation technology. The intent was so that a Chinese state-owned company could build its own airliner with all components made in China. CrowdStrike found that the scheme was orchestrated by a provincial branch of China's top intelligence agency, the Ministry of State Security. The branch coordinated a hacking team that targeted foreign companies that supplied parts for the C919 plane, including Amitech, Honeywell, Safran, Capstone Turbine, and GE. It also recruited Chinese nationals to work in the target companies and use them to plant malware into its network. CrowdStrike concluded that 13 individuals across 4 different U.S. indictments were all related to the same scheme, 10 within China and 3 outside. They worked as thieves and recruiters for the CCP. The 3 outside China were jailed in the United States. One of them was a U.S. Army Reserves officer. However, the other 10 are still inside China. With this stolen tech, China built its first twin-jet airliner. So how has the United States responded to this? Since July 2018, the Trump administration has imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of Chinese imports, from agricultural products to consumer electronics. The tariffs are used to pressure the regime to make structural reforms to its economy, what Peter Navarro, Director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, describes as China's trading sins.
The 7 deadly sins here, basically, it's stop stealing our intellectual property, stop forcing technology transfer, stop hacking our computers to steal our trade secrets, stop dumping into our markets and putting our companies out of business, stop their state-owned enterprises from heavy subsidies, stop the fentanyl, stop the currency manipulation. These are all structural changes.
According to U.S. Census data, comparing from January to December 2018, the trade deficit has decreased every month in 2019. The two sides are currently working to seal a Phase 1 trade agreement set to include IP protection and Chinese purchases of U.S. farm goods. The administration has also moved to defend the United States against security risks posed by Chinese technology companies. In May, it banned Chinese telecom giant Huawei from doing business with U.S. firms on national security grounds. Since Huawei has close links with the Chinese regime, U.S. officials and experts are concerned the company's equipment can be used by Beijing for spying or to disrupt communication networks. It also has tightened up scrutiny of foreign investment in U.S. companies on security grounds. This has slowed the flow of Chinese investment in tech and AI. The DOJ is also cracking down on Chinese economic espionage, bringing more and more cases against Chinese actors. The CCP is feeling the pressure too. It posted the slowest GDP growth in 27 years in the second quarter of 2019. Industrial output growth has also fallen to new lows. To avoid U.S. tariffs, companies have also started moving part of their U.S.-bound production to other countries, such as Vietnam and Cambodia. Meanwhile, the country is drowning in huge amounts of debt. Public and private debt rose to 300% of GDP in the first quarter of 2019, fueling concerns of an economic downturn. Some experts say that a prolonged trade war could drive China into its first recession in decades. China has taken advantage of the United States through trade, theft, coercion, and deceit, and shows no signs of stopping. The CCP's intents are clear, and the United States is now taking a stand.